Hello and welcome to the Last Word on Spurs. We do hope you're keeping very, very safe and well. Thank you ever so much for joining us. And I mean, we'll laugh at this for potentially an update on Spurs' summer transfer window so far. Quietly, things might be starting to pick up. I'm joined, of course, when the word transfer comes to mind, with John and a brilliant Jamie Brown over at Daily Hotspur. Jamie fighting the corner for a quiet window so far. Jay, how you doing, bud? You okay?
I'm very good, thank you, Ricky. Obviously, it would be nice to come on here and have some actual signings to talk about. But yeah, obviously Spurs once again looking to move kind of late in the window. As I've been saying, maybe on the WhatsApp group, I'm still kind of calm about it. We're obviously only a week or so into the window, so yeah, looking forward to kind of discussing what we're looking forward to in the weeks to come.
Are you suggesting, Jay, that some people in the WhatsApp group are losing their heads at the moment?
There might be a bit of that. I think there has been a little bit of that. So,
I mean,
yeah,
I've
hopefully we can have a
refrained.
bit of calm on the show.
I have refrained for about 15 hours so far. I mean, I'm doing quite well, to be honest with you, after I got telling off by you. Joining myself and Jamie, we're delighted to welcome this man back to Last Word on Spurs. He has been one of the most positive guys you would have probably known on View from the Lane in terms of Spurs securing a top four finish, which felt like a long time ago now. It wasn't the season just gone, just for clear reference of that. We're joined by the brilliant journalist Charlie Eccleshare from The Athletic rejoins us. Charlie, how are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
Yeah, not bad. You're looking refreshed, Charlie, from covering Spurs for this season. I mean, does that happen very quickly, that refreshment? Or is it just the case that we've got a new manager in charge, a director of football coming in, it's almost a chance to kind of, let's go again?
Yeah, I think so. I think the Postecoglou appointment, for me anyway, felt and feels like a really positive development. Especially, you know, I know there are a lot of comparisons with Nuno 2 years ago because both searches took the same amount of time, but where then it felt like they sort of just rushed someone in because they needed to. I feel like Postecoglou is a really good appointment. And yeah, so I think, yeah, I think there are reasons to be, if not optimistic, then at least curious about what's coming next.
No pressure, Charlie. There are already a lot of viewers watching saying, please give us some positives. But I think the one positive you did give us off air is that, look, it is still very, very early. And many won't like me saying that, but it is still quite early into the window, despite the fact we are seeing and hearing teams lining up deals. That's right, Jamie. You keep on laughing, lining up deals. Charlie, I'm going to go straight in there and ask you the question, of course. Ange Postecoglou appointed Tottenham Hotspur head coach on a 4-year contract. Really keen to get your thoughts on that overall appointment. I think many will be intrigued to know from you personally, given your close links to the club, just how far he was up on Spurs' managerial shortlist. I'll just follow up afterwards on what you make of the fact that he may have to have an entire new coaching staff to join him. Overall thoughts on the appointment, Charlie?
I think it's a really exciting one. He was definitely someone that was on their list from the start. It's difficult to say, you know, necessarily who was first, who was second, who was third, etc. But he was there throughout. Everything apart from his age fitted the profile, really, because they wanted someone to come in who could help change the culture of the club, who could play attractive football, who was going to be positive, who could kind of unite the fans behind the team. And I think everything about his track record says he can do all of those things. So yeah, he ticks a lot of boxes for me. On the coaching staff, I mean, he's interesting because he said before on record that he likes having new coaching staff when he joins a club because it keeps him on his toes. He has to kind of prove himself again. He learns new things. So that's not going to faze him at all. Yeah, maybe, you know, it might be nice for him to have one or two of the guys he worked with at Celtic, but, you know, that's not going to happen. But bear in mind, he went to Celtic with a whole new coaching staff. He joined during when COVID was still rampant. And, you know, he'd moved at that time all the way over from Japan. You know, for most people, that would be something that might faze them. Not really for him. He threw himself into it. And I think it'll be the same at Tottenham.
I have to ask this question, Charlie, and I know you approved it off air, so I'm not doing anything wrong here by asking you this. Look, it has been a fairly quiet start to a window that's only opened over the past couple of weeks. It does feel like there's a lot more going on with other clubs at the moment, you'd argue, than Spurs. I mean, look, we've been linked highly with a goalkeeper, which we'll come on to shortly, but obviously this time last year, I think you was on, we were looking at tying up Richarlison. That would have been the third signing of the summer. At this point, we had already, of course, over the line, Perisic through the door. And of course, we had another one as well coming through the door as well. You have to give me that second signing we had as well at the time. Basuma. Yep. Thank you, Jay. Should we be concerned, Charlie? Should Spurs be concerned about a lack of either incomings or outgoings, given the fact that it feels like it should be a very, very big club for the summer or sorry, a big change for the club in terms of potentially incomings, outgoings. Should Spurs fans be concerned? Postecoglou only just joining, Scott Munn yet to come through the door. Thoughts?
I don't think at this point there's too much to worry about. I mean, just comparing it with last summer, I was thinking about this earlier today. Richarlison, that was a pre-July the 1st one because Everton needed to sell by the end of the financial year. So that kind of expedited that one. Perisic was done very quickly, and that was a consequence of having, obviously, Conte in charge already. He knew he wanted the player. Difference this summer, obviously, Postecoglou has only recently come in, so that one couldn't really happen in the same way. Obviously, yeah, Basuma happened more quickly, but I guess also you'd say none of those three were huge successes. I still think Basuma is a great player and may well be a success. I think Richarlison may well come good this summer. This season, a few people have said to me, actually, they think with Ange Postecoglou that could work really well. Look, sometimes these things take a bit longer. I'm not saying it will necessarily be a good window for Tottenham, but I don't think you can, we're not even in July yet. And I totally get it, especially when you look at other clubs and maybe they are moving a bit more quickly. And as you say, it's a big rebuilding job this summer for Tottenham, but no, I wouldn't be getting too panicked just yet.
Now, obviously, someone else we saw arrive at the football club earlier this summer, and as we mentioned, he's going to start work at the start of July, is Scott Munn. Of course, it does feel like he was quite important in the role of appointing Ange Postecoglou. Of course, they're from the same nationality. Of course, they've worked together before. Does it feel like the fact that he was so important in appointing Postecoglou that Levy might maybe take a back step now and kind of allow him to really take on that role and have a lot of responsibility?
Yeah, quite possibly. I mean, I think most people here will be saying, well, I'll believe it when I see it, because in theory, yes, that is that's the idea. The Scott Munn appointment came about. They did a big sort of internal audit of how the football side of things were running, and that was one of the things that came out. Was that there was an appetite for this sort of position, someone who could come in and act almost as a conduit. So yeah, I think there is that potential, but we'll have to wait and see, because even when Paratici was in place as the director of football, it was still Daniel Levy who led the appointment of Antonio Conte. A lot of people think that because Conte and Paratici are compatriots, that it was Paratici leading that. It wasn't. It was still Daniel Levy. So yeah, we'll see. That's definitely the idea and the theory behind it. And I think obviously in an ideal world, if Scott Munn is doing his job well and if he's trusted, then yeah, you might see a bit of that. And look, he does come highly recommended. I think people within the club are excited about what he can do. I think he's a good operator. Sounds like he's got a good temperament, not a big ego or anything like that. So I am curious to see how that plays out. And obviously, as I'm sure we'll get onto as well, there's a director of football to consider. So and Spurs as well, for all they get criticised, and I've been among them, for how the club is structured. They have made a lot of hires over the last few years. When you think of Paratici obviously came in, Greta Steinson, Andy Spaulding, Simon Davis, who's been promoted to the head of the academy, now Scott Munn. So I think there is definitely a recognition that they did need to tweak the system that was too reliant on one man. So yeah, we'll see how it plays out with Scott Munn.
You mentioned director of football. So it only feels right, Charlie, to ask you how you feel that search is going. And with the nature of Tottenham, it feels really unfair to ask you to put a time frame on anything with Tottenham related, given, like I say, the nature of the football club. I would think they'd like to have this done sooner rather than later so they can start to move on a number of targets you'd like to think. What do you think, Charlie? Is that realistic
100%.
to think that?
Yeah, 100%. But I mean, they would have, in an ideal world, had the director of football in before they had the head coach, because the theory is that the director of football kind of sets the tone for the overall direction, brings in a head coach that aligns with that vision. There's a risk, I don't think this will happen, but there's a risk that you bring in a head coach and then you bring in a director of football afterwards who maybe their vision doesn't quite align. So yeah, we'll have to see on that one. But for sure, they wanted to get this done sooner. And they will be doing everything to try and get it done. The problem is there aren't tons of candidates for this sort of role. Like, I know from earlier in the process, looking at it, a lot of them were probably lower profile than what most fans were expecting. But then, Paratici came in with a big profile. He was one of those sort of celebrity directors of football, if there is such a thing. I think there is nowadays in football, and it didn't really work out, though some would say the deals he did were actually in the main pretty decent. But yeah, that's something they need to get sorted quickly. It's it's an issue, and they've got a team of people. I mentioned Greta Steinson before, people like that who are holding the fort. But that director of football is a massive appointment for any club.
Do you mind me asking before Jamie just starts back in there, just to be a pain, sorry, Charlie. So at the moment then, is it a case where he'll simply be kind of offered profile of players, Postecoglou, and it'll be up to him to ultimately decide? I mean, I think that's a key question to ask, that if they don't have that director in football in place by, say, the end of the window, just hypothetically, how is this current structure of bringing players in? I'm presuming he'll have his own ideas as to who he might like, and the club will also have their own ideas, because as we've seen last season, that reference from Conte, club signings, came to mind. How do you think it's currently working at the moment without a director of football, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and I think that club signing thing is really pertinent. Yeah, we're almost exactly a year on from Conte telling us that in career, about Jed Spence, and then you saw that with someone like Dan Juma coming in, and it was a bit like, what's going on here? It was pretty clear after not very long that was Conte's view on that one too. I mean, basically, the long and short of it is Postecoglou will speak to the recruitment team about what he wants and where they think the obvious gaps in the squad are. They'll then work to identify new players within kind of whatever the budget, the budget that's available. And I think the club would be at pains to say that, even without a director of football, the recruitment team haven't been sat there sort of twiddling their thumbs, not doing anything. They've been working to identify targets. They've still got, someone like Leonardo Gabbanini, who's kind of, heads up the scouting operation with a bunch of guys working into him. So there are a lot of people there. So they will work with Ange Postecoglou in the same way the director of football would once he's appointed. And then the manager does get the final say, which is why something like the club signing thing is maybe a little bit misleading, and why I think some people, when Conte said that, were a little bit surprised. Because, that's how it works. That the manager doesn't, or certainly shouldn't, have signings foisted upon him. But I think what will be a really interesting subplot to all this is Postecoglou's tended to work with a degree of autonomy as other clubs. He's probably not going to have that to the same extent at Spurs. Like any modern club, they've got the director of football structure. So it'll be really interesting to see how that plays out, and how much his vision does align with the director of football, and also how much the signings look like they're his or led by him, and how much they're led by others at the club.
Now, obviously, I think this is going to annoy a couple of people, this question, and I'm going to say, obviously, Spurs, we have actually made a signing so far this window. So we have got one on the board, and that's Dejan Kulusevski.
Cheek of it.
I know he was technically signed 18 months ago, but look, obviously, deal made permanent with around £25 million for him. Obviously, it was a difficult season for him last year. I think it was just 2 league goals for him. I mean, despite that drop-off, do you think Spurs have still got themselves a real kind of bargain here? Obviously, 23-year-old still. And it sounds like they tried to do a bit of negotiating and trying to get the price down as well. So do you think Spurs have got a bargain on their hands still here with Kulusevski?
Yeah, funny enough, I was writing about Kulusevski today. The piece will go up tomorrow morning. And I think it's interesting because, as you say, it was a difficult second season. He only got the 2 goals. He still got a good number of assists. And I think as well, because he was so explosive in that first half of the season where he came in, helped Spurs get top 4. His numbers were superb. It was 5 goals and 8 assists in 18 games. I think it is still a great deal. That you look at that money, 25 million, give or take, pounds, for a player of that age. He's 23. He has so much potential. The players all think he's amazing. I mean, I remember interviewing Christian Romero, and he singled out Kulusevski. I know Emerson Royale was saying to players at the start of this season, like, whoa, this guy's just on fire. I think we forget as well, he got a thigh injury, a really unfortunate time in September on international duty, missed 10 games, came back within 2 minutes, had that amazing assist for Kane against Liverpool, then another really good assist in the next game against Leeds for Bentancur. Then the World Cup comes. First game back, he gets another injury. And it was just one of those seasons. He only did the 90 minutes 4 times. And from speaking to people who know Postecoglou well, they think he could really thrive under him. Like those wingers are so important to Postecoglou. You know, they're there to constantly take their man on, and when the other winger's got the ball, they should be in the box, you know, trying to get goals. The other thing that I've spoken to a few bit about is the idea of him potentially playing as a number 8. Postecoglou's preferred system is with a 6 sitting and then 2 8s either side of him, much like what City do. And yeah, I mean, I think Kulusevski, because he liked playing in a more central role, did it a bit towards the end of last season as well. I think that's something that I'd like to see tried as well. But yeah, he's such a talented player. So yeah, I think last season, you know, he wasn't the only one who found it difficult going at times. So yeah, I feel quite optimistic for him.
Do you think with obviously Porro coming into the team and maybe going into a back 4 that we might see Porro played as a right winger and maybe, as I think as you said there, maybe Kulusevski playing as like an attacking 8? Do you think that's a possibility at all?
Maybe. I'm always skeptical about the ability of fullbacks. I think he's a wing back. That's the thing. Like that just suits him so perfectly. I don't think he's you know, he doesn't to me look like a fullback in a 4, not yet anyway. I mean, we all saw what happened in that Newcastle game. I don't think he's beyond, you know, with the right coaching, maybe that could work. And or I think what you may see, you know, Postecoglou likes to have one of his fullbacks inverting, sometimes even both, but one of them inverting and then the other sort of really bombing forward, almost playing as a winger, and I think that could suit Porro. As for whether he could play himself as a winger in a front 3, I think it's a very different skill because, you know, attacking from deeper positions is very different to as a winger. You're getting the ball so much higher up the pitch. You've got a fullback like smashing into you straight away. It's a lot harder in a lot of ways. I think Porro's best when he's building up that head of steam from deeper positions. You think of the goals he scored. That one at Southampton, brilliant finish, but you know he's coming onto that from slightly deeper, and so I think that's where he's best. But you know, and that throws up this issue that Tottenham have of that they've played with a back 3 for a couple of years now. The squad is built really for a back 3. You've got a lot of wing backs there. You've got a lot of centre backs who prefer to play in a 3. It's going to be really interesting to see that evolution towards playing with a back 4 and Porro in particular.
I have to ask you, Charlie, you said on the actual confirmation of him completing that transfer to Spurs, I had to stand still and watch and wait for the decision to be made about my future. Unfortunately, I understood it took that extra time because many people had changed at the top of the club and in the teams. But I'm now fine and I can't wait to be my future at Tottenham. I think it'd be good to know from you. You mentioned about Gabardini earlier, kind of heading up that recruitment structure. I mean, Paratici brought a lot of different people into the club in terms of that recruitment structure. Do you expect it to massively change under Postecoglou's tenure, or do you think it will stay the same in that club? Because it just feels like we talk about this kind of rebuild and transformation and ultimately a massive change at Spurs. Will that also, do you feel, be including the actual recruitment staff and the way things are being done?
Possibly, but I think they did. They already saw what's happened over the last year or so as quite a big step in the right direction, bringing in these specialised people. I mean, Gabardini's an interesting one. He's very close to Paratici. So on a personal level, does that change things for him with someone who's close to leaving? Maybe. And, you know, lots of these guys were brought in by Paratici, Steinson among them, Spalding last summer. So I think ultimately they want to keep the structure. They think the structure is good. And look, bear in mind, it's not like Spurs were dissatisfied with the work Paratici was doing. You know, they kept him on for a long, long time. Most people would say too long, given what was happening behind the scenes. So I don't think they're wanting to sort of overhaul the structure necessarily. You know, it may be in the natural churn of things, people come and go. And as I say, someone like Gabardini, maybe because of that close relationship with Paratici. But for the moment, no, I think they believe in that structure. And, you know, to give them their due, if you look at the transfers under Paratici's watch, I think generally they were pretty good. You know, jury's still out on a lot of them because they only joined a year ago. And I don't think you can judge people after just one season, especially after season like Spurs had. But when you think of Kulusevski, Romero, Bentancur, I think that's a good core of players to build on. Porro, I think, will be good. Basuma, I think, could be great in this system under Postecoglou as that sort of lone sitting central midfielder. So, yeah, I think they're still pretty satisfied with that structure as it is.
Before I ask you about positions, Sean makes a really good point here. And it's one that I think the Athletic have reported themselves. And Charlie, you might have also reported this, that Spurs are looking at more of a data-driven model, similar, dare I say, to the likes of Brentford and Brighton. Would that be almost correct in the way Spurs are approaching this current summer, when they're looking more at the data behind players rather than jumping in head first? They're looking at maybe names.
Yeah, that's been a big change, and with the appointment of Postecoglou as well, it was more that the data, what the numbers were saying was a big consideration, and that's something they're really putting a lot of emphasis on and moving towards. So yeah, it'll be interesting then. Seeing the kind of the signings that they make and whether they are especially different. And yeah, it might be that there are some that come in and fans are less enamored with, but that there will be, at least you can say, there will be a kind of statistical rationale for why these guys are coming in. And especially Postecoglou plays a pretty specialized system. And so you need to have people who can fit in with that. And I guess a big part of that is looking at their numbers, how press resistant are they, things like that, yes, aren't totally quantifiable, but there are ways of helping you understand how suitable a player is going to be.
Okay, interesting. I'm going to bring on to positions, and James is going to come back in and ask you about some of the key players that we might be after. It has been widely reported that Spurs are plotting to sign a couple of centre-backs who can play predominantly on the left and on the right side in Postecoglou's central duo. We have also seen reports they could bring in an experienced and a younger centre-back to supplement the squad, along with potentially a winger and a creative midfielder. Are those areas that you're specifically aware of yourself? Would you go along with that? Or is there any other positions that Spurs are looking to fill between now and the end of this summer transfer window?
So yeah, my understanding from what I've been told is, the priority areas are goalkeeper, centre-backs, and that's probably a couple, one of whom could be Clement Longley. I think that would, if they can find a solution to the fact that he's on pretty big wages at Barcelona, but Longley was really liked and respected at the club last season. I know he didn't stand out especially, but I think the view at the club was that he trained really well, the dreaded good around the place sort of cliche. But I think he was, and I think he's not someone who, he's not going to kick up a fuss about not playing every week. So, someone of that sort of profile, even if it's not him, and then more of a kind of first choice. This left-sided centre-back has been, that's been a bit of a saga for a long, long time. And clearly that's something they need. That's priority position. And then that creative midfielder, which again, you could say really since Christian Eriksen, that's been lacking. There may also be a wide forward, but I think ideally that would sort of be, you could bring someone in who could play more centrally and wide, that kind of creative midfielder. So those are the priority areas. And yeah, it's just finding those players, because obviously a lot of clubs who they're competing with are also looking for similar players. And that left-sided centre-back, that's become, it's interesting because that's really evolved over the last sort of 5 years. I don't think before then we really thought in those terms. You just kind of had two centre-backs, but now with teams wanting to play out from the back, it's almost essential. And you have seen Spurs run into difficulties without that, and that's part of the reason why they've always played that back three, so that they can have a Ben Davis or a Clement Longley or someone like that to try and fill in, I suppose.
Now, obviously, another big position that Spurs are looking to fill this summer is goalkeeper. Obviously, with Lloris looking like he might be departing the club. David Raya was a name that's obviously been mentioned, but this kind of early reports this week were suggesting that Spurs might walk away from a deal, considering that Brentford are asking for quite a lot of money. It sounded like £40 million that they're asking for. So they have been looking at alternative Spurs, and a guy a lot of people are asking for in the comments for us to ask about Vicario, obviously of Empoli, an Italian goalkeeper. It'd be interesting to get your take on kind of the current situation about the goalkeeper.
Yeah, I mean, I do think Raya is a tricky one because, Spurs really want him, but ultimately there does come a point at which there's a price point you're not willing to pay, and 40 million, which is a suggested amount Brentford want for a keeper who's out of contract next year, is a lot. I know a lot of people feel that, well, goalkeeper is such an important position, just do it, just suck it up and do it. We'll see on that one. Yeah, Vicario is a cheaper option. And I'll be completely honest, he's not someone I know a huge amount about. One of those people who's come a little out of left field, and who, if that does move, then I'll spend my time watching clips of him, speaking to people who've played with him and coached him or whatever, to get a sense of what he's about. Because if he's going to come in as first choice, potentially, whoever it is who comes in as first choice, and I know we've got we'll probably talk about Hugo Lloris, but Hugo Lloris has been the goalkeeper for 11 years. So it's a big moment, I think, in the evolution of the team to move to someone different. But I do think having someone who is comfortable with the ball at their feet could be transformative for this team, because that was something that did really hold Spurs back last season. And look, I love Lloris. I think he's been brilliant for the club, but I think they just evolved, or football has evolved maybe beyond that. And that could give Spurs another dimension.
How important, Charlie, in your opinion, is it to have a real, to say a top-class goalkeeper? Because, I mean, for me personally, it kind of sets the precedent and the foundations from the very back, what you're trying to build. And we've heard a lot this summer that Spurs are rebuilding from the very back and then looking forward. So, I mean, given the fact that already there's murmurings that Spurs might not be willing to pay the asking price of Brentford, I understand what Jamie's saying, that 40 million is a lot of money to pay for a goalkeeper that's got a year left on his contract. Brentford have already secured his replacement. But, we're talking about a guy that's homegrown. That would obviously enable you to bring in another foreign player. That's a massive, massive tick, you have to say. The fact that he's got Premier League experience, again, a massive tick. Knowledge, of course, of the way Spurs will want to play out from the back. There's many that maybe feel this is such a good opportunity and it would set the precedent for the summer. Would you go as far as to say that? I mean, in terms of the mood around the fan base, I think we all, I don't want to speak for every single Spurs fan, but I think we all need to feel that we are going in the right direction, the same direction. And for me, the goalkeeper is an absolutely pivotal position in the squad. Have to get this one right, don't they, Charlie? Simply have to.
That is a convincing argument that you've made there.
Listen, I don't listen to me the best of times. I'm not going to have any decision there, but I just thought it's so important for the squad, Charlie. You see where I'm coming from?
No, I do. And I agree with you. It is such an important position. I think it makes a massive difference to how teams play. You've seen that. Look at Man United with De Gea, who, of course, he's brilliant at doing what he does from a shot-stopping perspective and his reflexes, but he really held them back. He has really held them back, with the way he can't play out. And you've seen other teams bring in a goalkeeper who can, that was one of the first things Pep Guardiola did when he moved to City. First thing he did, get rid of Joe Hart, bring in a goalkeeper play out. As it was Claudio Bravo, and that didn't work out. But then he got Edison, that transformed them. Liverpool, Alisson transformed them. So it is massive. And I think maybe there's a lag where we're at now between us realizing how important goalkeepers are, because traditionally that was who you didn't spend a huge amount on. But now, we're at a point where they are so important to how teams play. But the market doesn't seem like it's quite caught up with that. They still go for less by and large than other positions. And I wonder if that will change in the next few years. I suspect it probably will. So, I mean, I agree. I would be tempted to go big, but this is the thing. We don't always know exactly what's being asked, and and there's always a knock-on effect, isn't there? If you spend that on a certain player, does that mean other teams look at you and think, oh, they're willing to spend above market rate? So there's lots to consider. Spurs aren't in Europe next season, which isn't ideal from a financial perspective, clearly, as well as a footballing one. But I think it is a position they have to absolutely get right. And if it isn't Raya, then whoever it is, they have to be ready to come in and deal with it's a very pressurized position as well. And under Postecoglou, they are going to be asked to take risks. And so there's going to be, the fans have got to give them the sort of time and space as well to make mistakes. But I mean, Raya, I love Raya. I think he's fantastic whenever I've seen him. I mean, in that game at the back end of last season, I was just marveling at his passing range off his left foot as well as his right, just absolutely sensational. So I think it would be a blow if they don't get him. And then you just hope, all clubs have second, third targets. You just hope that if it is someone else, that they can come in and do a similar job.
Agree. Yeah, I mean, I just think at the moment, final one on it, and I know James is coming to ask you about Hugo Lloris. I think for Ange Postecoglou, for how much we see for him, a goalkeeper is such an important factor in the way he does play out from the back. My biggest thing for me on it just kind of sets that precedent, as I've said, in terms of the mood over the summer. I'm not speaking for every Spurs fan. I would speak for every Spurs fan, but I just know there's a mood in the fan base that, you know, we want to all feel that we're moving in the right direction. Having a competent goalkeeper in that we've all, in the most politest way, that we've all heard of and we're all knowledgeable of. And Raya is certainly that. I think he played ever so well, Charlie, as you referenced, at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. You know, made a couple of great saves, a double save that was phenomenal. I think on that day, I think he convinced a lot of Spurs fans that maybe he could be the right man for Hugo Lloris. So it is really, really important. And I'll hand over to Jamie to ask you about potentially the man he might be replacing.
Yeah, I mean, Hugo Lloris been at the club for 11 years now. Obviously, as you mentioned earlier, a fantastic servant for us, brilliant shot stopper. But we've really seen him kind of come out and speak about potentially leaving the club. Do you think that that's something that Spurs will kind of grant his wish and allow him to leave? And where do you think a potential destination for Lloris might be?
Yeah, I think he will go, and I don't think Spurs will stand in his way. The destination one's really interesting because this has been a question that's been coming up like every year for the last few years, and there's been interest from Italy. Previously, the sense was always that he might go back to Nice, his first club. For whatever reason, those options maybe aren't quite so available now. Obviously, there was talk as well of an offer from Saudi Arabia, which is, you know, that's probably going to be something we hear about a lot of players. We'll talk about Son later as well. So I'm curious. I don't know. I think he probably still has one more move in him elsewhere before going back to France. But we'll see. I mean, it's a strange position in a way because it really does depend on where there are vacancies, in inverted commas. You know, if you've got a good keeper, you're not going to bring in someone like Lloris because I don't think Lloris is not going to be happy being the number two. And that, you know, that's one of the things, that's one of the reasons why I think he will go, because he just doesn't really want to stay and be a second choice. And I think that's completely fair enough. But yeah, I'm going to watch that one with interest because if you know, a year or so ago, I would have said he'll go to Italy or he'll go to France. But yeah, that hasn't quite moved in the way I thought it would. So yeah, we'll see. I'd be surprised if he moved to the Middle East at this point in his career. But then, you know, we saw Toby Alderweireld did that a couple of years ago, and I think that took a few people by surprise. You know, he was a fair bit younger than Lloris as well then. So yeah, we'll have to see on that one.
One to keep an eye on. What we are going to do, we are going to go for our first break of the show for our listeners on audio. For your absolute sins, there are 1,000 of you watching us live right here, waiting on bated breath as to what's going to come out of Charlie Eccleshare's mouth here with John and the wonderful Charlie Eccleshare from the Athletic on this last word on Spurs. Of course, view from the lane, journalist of the Athletic. We'll be letting Charlie tell us a bit later on about what is coming for a lot of those Athletic viewers and readers. And for those that want to tune in, of course, there's lots of content, I'm sure, coming away over the summer, where hopefully Charlie's reporting on a lot of Tottenham signings. No pressure, Charlie. I hope you let me have that one. Guys, just a quick reminder, with pre-season coming up, fast approaching that, we are delighted to be sponsored by NordVPN. You can right now get your free 1 month and a bonus gift by using the code LWS to get a huge discount off your NordVPN plan plus 1 month for free. Charlie, you're going to be there, aren't you, of course, for the pre-season tour? Before we get back into things, are you looking forward to that?
Yeah, I really am. Last year was Korea, and that was amazing. Absolutely loved being there. This year is Perth. Obviously a different part of Australia, but, you know, for Postecoglou, I think that would be quite cool. Scott Munn as well. And then on to Bangkok and Singapore. So, yeah, I mean, I'm really excited about that. And, you know, it's a good, as a journalist, it's a really good, those summer tours are great. You get good access to the players and people around the club. You really get a sense of what's going on. I mean, it's funny now because I think about last summer in Korea and all the optimism that there was around the place. Obviously, how things then worked out. But yeah, that should be fun, and I hope I'll have lots of fun features and things to write while I'm out there. And yeah, first glimpse of some new signings potentially.
Now, hopefully a couple of those new signings will be some central defenders, because I think it's very clear that that's an area that Postecoglou will hope to strengthen in. Obviously, a lot of fans want us to do that as well, because conceded so many goals last season. I think it was 63 in total in the league, which is quite a shocking stat. Obviously, we've been linked with a couple of names. Tapsoba, obviously a Bayer Leverkusen, a really good young central defender. Aymeric Laporte, which obviously sounds like a very ambitious one, but that's another name that's been linked. Maguire, obviously Max Kilman as well is another name. do we know of kind of any targets at the moment that Spurs are looking at in central defence? And do you think there could be a big overhaul in central defence this summer?
Yeah, I mean, those are all ones. Mark Gay's another one who I've heard mentioned. He's someone Spurs have been looking at for a while. Really good player, really, really talented. I think would fit the bill of what they're after, but he wouldn't come cheap. And yeah, there are lots of players in that position you think might be on the way out. Yeah, Eric Dyer's got 12 months left on his contract. Davinson Sanchez, I think, could be on the way. Got Joe Rodon, Tanganga, who, you know, his futures are fairly uncertain. Joe Rodon obviously coming off the back of a loan. Tanganga having not played a great deal in the last couple of years, really. So it is an area where I think there's going to be quite a lot of churn. And you're talking about a situation, as I mentioned before, where you're evolving from playing with 3 at the back to playing with 4. So the profile of player that you're looking for is slightly different all of a sudden. So yeah, I think it'll be really interesting to see who they end up with there. And again, like we were talking about with the goalkeeper, you need someone really comfortable with their feet. That's going to be something that Postecoglou demands of them. So we might see, I can't imagine someone like Davinson Sanchez coming in now because of the type of defender that he is. So I think there will be quite a lot of evolution and churn in that area. And yeah, they are ones they have to get right. Because as you say, the amount of goals they conceded last season was astonishing. I think per game it was their worst ever in the Premier League, which is amazing, really, when you think of some of the defenders they've had in years gone by and when they were, under our dealers and that sort of thing, when they played in a pretty attacking way.
And before people have a go at me for this is just a question. I'm going to ask Charlie. This is just a question before I start getting lots of abuse for this. One of the squad options, as you actually mentioned, Charlie, so I'm going to blame you for this. I'm not going to take the blame for this. Would be to bring back Clement Longley. The club, of course, did announce the end of his loan as a formality last week, and there were suggestions already that Spain would be, Spain or Barcelona would be willing to maybe let him go for a nominal fee. I mean, many would argue it could make sense from a business perspective. You buy him for 5, you could flip him for 15, 20 in a year's time. Do you have a feeling Spurs might revisit that one towards the end of the window, depending, of course, who they do get in centre-back wise?
Yeah, quite possibly. As I said, I think he's well thought of at the club. They think he did a good job. They think he was solid, good around the place, not someone who's going to kick up a fuss about not starting every week. I think, to me, yeah, he's fine as a kind of backup option, especially as left-sided centre-backs are quite scarce. I think it just has to be that he's a backup option. He's not coming in as first choice because, yeah, I just think Spurs need someone of a level more like Christian Romero, as inconsistent as he's been at times. I still think the potential is great there. So I think they need someone with a higher ceiling than Longley, who's more, to me, a kind of steady Eddie backup type.
And obviously, in terms of departures in the central defence, there's a lot of players that feel like they do need to move on at the moment. Obviously, Davinson Sanchez, he's coming to near the end of his contract as well. Japhet Tanganga, another player. Obviously, Joe Rodon returning from his loan spell. And it'll be interesting to get your take on Dyer as well, because he's obviously another player who's got 12 months left on his contract. So, again, are we expecting maybe a couple to go out in central defence?
Yeah, I think so. As long as they can get... As long as they can get buyers. I mean, Tanganga, I think, will either be loaned out, probably more likely a loan, though he could be sold. And he's only got 2 years left on his deal. Sanchez, I think they'd certainly like to get rid of. Whether they'd find they'll find a buyer, but whether they'll find someone who'll pay much, I'm slightly skeptical of, given he's only got a year left on his contract and hasn't been in the best of form of late. Eric Dyer, yeah, I mean, Dyer's got a decision to make. I guess the club have a decision to make what he does because, yeah, he's entering that last year, coming to a point of his career where he might think, do I want a new challenge? Would it be best for everyone if he moves on? I mean, he's such an interesting player, Dyer. I was talking about this with someone yesterday. Like, he's always loved by managers, whoever's managing him. But I think a lot of fans feel less positive towards him. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see where that one goes. But that's definitely an area where I think they will try and thin out the squad, which will be a theme of the summer. They've got so many players they need to get rid of, really, because the squad's just too big and they're not in Europe, so there just aren't that many minutes to go around.
Do you get a feeling, Charlie, just with the number of centre-backs we've had or we've got at the moment, that it will be an element that we have to maybe sell a couple before we can buy in?
Maybe. Yeah. I mean, not even from a financial perspective necessarily, but yeah, just from a numbers perspective. Because it's always tricky, that, isn't it? Do you sell first, or do you buy first? But then clubs know you're desperate to sell, so it's kind of tricky. Like, it's always a bit of cat and mouse there. But I definitely think they can't go into the season, because numbers wise they've already got a lot of centre backs, and they're going from playing with 3 centre backs to 2. So yeah, I think they will have to get rid of some. And the sequence in which that happens will be interesting. Maybe there's scope for swaps and exchanges, but I think some teams are a little wary of doing that.
I'm going to let Jamie take my next question, because I want one further one to ask you, just in relation to this centre-back situation. What do you personally feel, Charlie, Spurs will end up with, if you don't mind me asking you that, in terms of come the start of the season or end of the window? Do you generally feel we will have that top-class centre-half next to Christian Romero? Or do you generally feel it will end up being, in the most polite way I put this, a Longley or somebody not of adequate ability next to Romero? What's your gut feeling on it at the moment?
It's a really hard one, because I'm sure, like many Spurs watchers, I've had moments thinking, would it be someone like Bastoni? He was the guy who window after window seemed like he was being linked with, and he thought it'd be so perfect. So I think he would be so perfect, but yeah, I don't think that one's going to happen now. I really don't know. I think it is sort of 50-50, because we've seen before. There was Milan Skriniar as well back in 2020. That one was close. Like we've seen with Raya, I think they'll do a lot to try and get the player, but there will be a limit. I don't think they will. They're not going to go and spend huge sums on that left side of centre backs, because I thought it was going to happen last summer. That they were going to do that. That was what Conte wanted. Mourinho had wanted it the summer, 2 summers before, and it didn't happen. And if you remember, they brought Longley in pretty early in the window. Really, it was like mid-July, and that almost signalled like the waving of the white flag in the sense of what sort of left-sided centre-back they were going to go after. It was much more of a stopgap, and which took me by surprise a bit, because I thought last summer that was such a priority area that they would push the boat out. And I know that's how Antonio Conte felt. He felt that was so pivotal to his system. So the fact they didn't do it then, they didn't do it in 2020, means I'm a little bit skeptical. I certainly don't think it's a guarantee that this long-awaited kind of mythical holy grail left-sided centre-back will come. I hope it does, because I think it would make a massive difference to the team. But yeah, I don't think it's a guarantee.
Now, obviously, another area of the squad that we are quite bloated in is wing back. Obviously, Ivan Perisic, Sergio Reguilon, another name, Jed Spence and Ryan Sessegnon. Obviously, all players who have kind of really struggled to get into the first team. What do we kind of think about their futures? Are these players that maybe might move on? Maybe, obviously, the likes of Jed Spence. Will he get an opportunity to kind of prove himself under Postecoglou? What we kind of expecting with those 4 players?
Yeah, so Perisic, I wouldn't be surprised to see move on. I think there's fairly universal acknowledgement that it hasn't really worked out as was hoped. Then Reguilon is free to go, more or less. I mean, look, the line very much from Spurs and from Postecoglou is that every player is going to arrive with a clean slate and that he'll look at them, which I'm sure is true. But I think, my sense is that Reguilon and Perisic are the ones more likely to move on than those others. I mean, Sessegnon has played a fair amount when he's been fit. Obviously, that's just been the issue with him, really, since he joined Spurs, is just getting that consistency of availability. He's got 2 years left on his contract. Feels like a bit of a crossroadsy moment for him. Jed Spence, I'm really interested by, because I think he could play either as that more attacking wing back, or he's a great defender. I think people think of him as being, someone who just flies forward and can't really defend. At Forest, actually, he was more revered for his defensive abilities in a kind of like Wan-Bissaka way of just like no one can get past this guy. So I'd be really interested to see what Postecoglou does with him and just how much of a chance he gets, because, you know, he was the guy. I'm sure when we were chatting this time last year, there was so much chat about Spence, when's Spence going to come, and all of this. It became, you know, almost a daily question that was being asked, and he did, and then it didn't work out. So that will be a really interesting one. Look, I'd be surprised, I'd be disappointed if he is loaned out again, because I think he needs minutes. But that said, they've got Porro and Emerson Royale. And Emerson Royale actually had a really good season last season. So they are well stocked there. So that, again, there's going to have to be movement there. And that's why I think this summer is so challenging, because there are so many players that need to move on to thin the squad. I did a piece on the kind of the state of Spurs squad, and it's so bloated. And they've got to streamline it further because they're not in Europe. And then they still want to bring players in. So you're talking about double figures plus players that you're trying to move on in a pretty bad market, to be honest, especially when you're talking about if you want to sell to clubs abroad. The money's just not there.
So obviously one of three positions that I feel was a real priority. We spoke about two of them, a goalkeeper and a central defender. Another one is an attacking midfield. Obviously, it's been a long time since we've had like that real creative guy. Obviously, Christian Eriksen was that guy that I'm very much seen how much we've missed him. There's been a number of names linked. Obviously, James Maddison, one that's been strongly linked. Harvey Barnes, Alex Scott is another very interesting one at Bristol City. Obviously, a guy who does seem to have some sort of affiliation for Spurs. We've seen him kind of posting about Spurs when he was younger. And another one that was linked to that as well was Xavi Simons. Obviously, the guy who early days was very big at Barcelona and PSG as well. Currently at PSV over in the Netherlands. Is this a position that you feel as well really needs strengthening in, and do you think that's what Spurs will look to fill this summer?
Yeah, that's definitely one of the priority positions, both in my view and much more importantly, the club's view. Again, we have been here before to an extent. I remember last summer hearing whispers about James Maddison that didn't happen. Spurs have been looking at Maddison since he was at Coventry and have never really pushed the boat out to try and get him. Could this be the summer? Yeah, it could, but Leicester are asking for a lot of money. And that's going to be another potential rare situation where it's how willing are Spurs to go on that. You've got Newcastle in the background as well, though they may go for cheaper options as also. But yeah, that he's definitely someone who feels like, I mean, I think Maddison's an amazing player. The goal he scored at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium last season was just sensational, and he has that star quality. Maybe the positionally speaking, a downside is that he can't really play as a wide forward. I know he played there for England the other night, and he's done it a bit, but I don't think that suits him so well. And I think ideally you'd have someone who can play centrally and wide to sort of solve two issues in one potentially. But yeah, that position is so crucial, but I think it will come in a slightly different way, because I think it will be that, assuming that's something similar to what he did at Celtic, I think it will be the system of the 6 and then the 2 8s. And you certainly need, I think someone like Bentancur will be great in more of a kind of getting up and down, finding pockets of space, linking things, stitching things together. But then, yeah, you do want that guy on the other side potentially to be that creative hub. And that's where someone like Maddison, well, I just think he could be brilliant. Him linking up with Son and Kane, but not an easy one to get done.
Jeremy might have the answer for you in the next question, but I'll ask you, Charlie, how important for you is it, this creative midfielder? You alluded to the fact that Spurs haven't had that since Christian Eriksen. Like the goalkeeper position, is this almost an absolutely crucial position of the way Postecoglou wants to set up this Spurs side ahead of next season? So in terms of the options that he's got, and Jamie will ask you about, obviously, one of our current players, whether he could do that. But for you, is that an absolutely fundamental position Spurs have to look at?
I think so, yeah. I mean, obviously Spurs still did score quite a lot of goals last season. Obviously, as we mentioned, they also conceded a lot. And Harry Kane is so good at doing what a conventional number 10 would, but there has been an over-reliance on him. So yeah, I do think it is a really, really important position. Maybe not to me quite as absolutely pivotal as like getting a good ball playing goalkeeper is. But yeah, it's still one of the areas they need to sort out.
Now, this is definitely not me suggesting that he's going to be the answer to those issues, but Tanguy Ndombele, of course, he's a guy who's coming back from his loan spell in Italy, having won a league title, which is quite incredible to say. Obviously, didn't play too much for that Napoli team, and as I said, wasn't like a massive part of that team. But do you think this is a guy that Postecoglou will take a look at, and maybe we might have? I don't know how many chances have been now. I think it's chance number 5, I think, of him coming back. Is there any possibility that Tanguy might resurrect his career at Spurs?
I referenced this in the piece I did on sort of who might benefit from Postecoglou coming in, that at the very least, a new manager means we can all write our sort of, is this the moment for Tanguy Ndombele pieces? So, yeah, thanks to Ange for that. Look, going back to what I said, the message about everyone getting a chance, yeah, in theory he will, and yeah, I think he could be great as one of those 2-8s in theory. But how many times have we, we've been once bitten, twice shy, I guess, with him, because many times we thought this could be the moment for him. I'm just not sure the amount of ground that you're asked to cover, the sort of relentlessness with which you're asked to press. I don't know necessarily if he's got that in him. Frustratingly, Postecoglou loves press-resistant players, and he's an amazingly press-resistant player. So I think he's got some of the things. He'd be perfect in some ways, but I'm not sure if he's got the whole package for what Postecoglou's looking for.
Yeah, I mean, it's a shame with Tanguy, because I know a lot of people say that he's such a talented player, and obviously on the ball he is, but I think as you're right, that whole package, he just doesn't offer enough in terms of his work rate and that. So that's a real shame. But there are a couple of other midfielders that are also being linked with a move away. Of course, another midfielder who's returning from a loan spell in Italy is Harry Winks. I think he was relegated with Sampdoria, so not a great loan spell for him. Lo Celso, another name who's returning from on loan. And Højbjerg, that's quite an interesting name that's obviously been linked with a move away. I think he was being linked with Bayern Munich. Obviously, that would be a return for him. Are we expecting any of these players to maybe move on this summer?
I think Winks, he's certainly one I'd expect to move on. Then there's Lo Celso again. He'll get a chance and could fit into the system, but I think it's tough once you've already been loaned out. And then Højbjerg is interesting. I think a lot of people are skeptical about how well he'll fit into Postecoglou's system. And I must say, if I look at what Ange did at Celtic, there's not an obvious spot for him. I don't think he can play in that lone 6 role. I'm also not convinced he can play as one of the 8s. But he's another one like with Dyer, who I said, every manager loves Højbjerg. So yeah, that may be the case with Postecoglou as well. And just he's a good squad option even if he's not starting every week. But yeah, I think for Winks, it's a shame, but I think he'll probably be on the move.
Charlie, how quickly, out of interest, do you think we'll see movement on some of these players? I mean, the loan players, because again, what you tend to find, as you know, with the tour, is you get that statement from Spurs to say, these players have travelled, these haven't made it, they're going to be left behind and looking for moves. So do you honestly think that, once kind of players are back in pre-season, we'll get to know fairly quickly where a lot of these players' futures do stand? I know obviously Andrew's got to come in, he's not going to have a lot of time to judge them, but I mean, given the fact, I think we've got, when you consider all those loan players coming back, I think it's a 37-man squad. So for the sake we're going to be playing one game a week pretty much most of the time, apart from when those domestic cups come into play, a lot of players that need to have their futures pretty much clarified, right?
Yeah, well, that was something that we saw last season on as we were heading off to Korea. Spurs announced that 4 of the players, was it Reguilon, Lo Celso, and Ndombele and Winks, wouldn't be on the tour. Again, it's a bit of a dilemma because you are playing your hand by doing that. You're basically saying to any interested buyer, we want to get these players off our hands. Then the other side, though, is do you bring them on the tour if you have no intention really of playing them that season? So it's all these are all the kind of decisions you've got to balance out. I don't know if Postecoglou will do something similar this year. I think it might be a bit more inclusive. Everyone gets a chance kind of thing. So yeah, I don't know. I think we might see a slightly different situation with that compared to last year, where Conte was very much like, these guys don't have a future under me. And then look, you saw none of them got fees, did they? They had to loan all 4 of them. So
yeah, it's interesting to see how that will play out. Of course, I say once pre-season does get underway, and look, one man it has quietened down on his future. That's not me looking to kind of light any touch paper at all, and that's in relation to Harry Kane. Of course, Spurs is poster boy of the football club. Do you think, Charlie, if he does enjoy working under Postecoglou, it's an attacking brand of football, of course, one in which that he enjoyed under Maurizio Pochettino, you'd say as well, that is it beyond any realm that he could still commit his future to the club? Where do you think we do stand on Harry Kane at the moment as things are? We've kind of time checked this 21st of June as we approach 9 p.m, so we can't be misquoted.
Yeah. No, my hunch is still that he will stay this summer and then go on a free next summer. Obviously, a lot could change between now and then. But yeah, I think on the manager's point, I wrote a piece on this that I think Spurs maybe had the idea that if they brought in a Mourinho or a Conte, that might convince Kane to stay, because it would be a kind of like, look, we're a serious club. We've got this big name manager in. Don't you want to be a part of that? And that didn't really work, because yes, while he enjoyed working under them, he didn't sign a new contract under either of them. My view, and I wrote this was before Postecoglou was appointed, but was that ultimately the best way to convince Kane to stay is to get someone in who makes him and the club believe that they're actually moving in the right direction, and that they're training on a really basic level, that training's fun, that you're coming in, you're enjoying being at the club and enjoying coming to work every day. And so I think Postecoglou will do those things, and that will give Spurs a chance. It's not a guarantee, but no manager's guarantee. Conte and Mourinho didn't guarantee anything with regard to Kane signing a new contract. So yeah, I think if that's the if it looks like they're moving in the right direction, then there is a possibility. But it does still feel a long way up. That does still feel a long way off at the moment, because we're talking, if you strip away the emotion, which obviously is a part of it, but talking about a team who aren't in Europe, who finished 8th last year, who were a shambles for a lot of the season. I don't know if that's enough for him.
Yeah, now another player, obviously his strike partner and the guy who's got that unbelievable record with in terms of combining for goals. Heung-min Son, we saw on Monday that obviously a story came out. I think it was ESPN that were reporting it. It was being linked with a move to Saudi Arabia. He's obviously since come out and kind of dismissed that and says he wants to remain in the Premier League. Do you think there's kind of any chances that maybe some of our other stars in the team, and maybe even some of the deadwood, might be looked at by some of these Saudi clubs?
I think everyone's hoping the deadwood will, the Saudi clubs will come in with a 50 million bid for whoever. Sonny, I was on Monday night, I was speaking to people about that, and they were steering me away from it, saying Son wouldn't want to go. And obviously then the following day, as you say, he came out and said that publicly. I think the Saudi, the emergence of these Saudi clubs is big. It is significant, and I think it's going to affect all Premier League clubs, whether directly or indirectly. Everyone's affected by if Saudi clubs come and buy Chelsea deadwood and get them out of this hole they're in, because that strengthens Chelsea's position. And clubs like Spurs, on some level, are competing with Chelsea for players, or there's such a domino effect. So I don't know if there are specific players that Spurs will have to brace themselves for offers from, but probably, because I think the ambition from Saudi Arabia is enormous. And I think they are going to be targeting players from all the biggest clubs.
Yeah, that obviously not many, as Ricky mentioned, not kind of a lot of moving out of the club at the moment. And very jealous of seeing maybe Chelsea move some of their guys off. So it would be nice if Saudi could come and do us a favour as well. But obviously two kind of questions combined into one. Firstly, what do you think would constitute a successful season in Ange Postecoglou's first campaign here? And the question we like to ask all the journalists at the end of the show, kind of how many signings do you expect Spurs to make between now and the end of the window?
Well, I'll start with the success. Yeah, I think I was saying before to you guys off air, wasn't I? I think for me, success this season, and this sounds a bit wishy-washy, but I think Spurs fans will know what I mean, having watched the team over the last few years, is that Postecoglou yes, hopefully they finish as high as possible. But I think if the season finishes and there's a real sense that they are moving in the right direction, and we can see the kind of football that he wants to play, and that the players are buying into it, and that the fans are buying into it, and that sort of triangulation between fans, players, and coach, that there is that sort of unity that there hasn't been in a long time. I think that will be a success. And look, that might be Spurs getting top 4. It might be Spurs finishing 7th. But just a feeling that they're moving in the right direction, I think will be really, really important. And, you know, that there are some games where they're playing entertaining football, and you really feel that connection again between the fans and the team, I think will be huge. And then on the signings point, how many players do I think they'll sign? Well, goalkeeper, probably 2 defenders, that creative midfielder, and then probably like a 5th kind of wild cardy option. You know, there's often that player who, you know, might be one a bit more for the future or something. So, yeah, I'll go with 5.
Yeah.
And you're going to tell us, Charlie, it's still early, right? Still early, nothing to panic about?
Still very early. Still very early. Don't panic, guys. We've got months more of this to come.
Yeah.
Oh, the delight of Jason McGovern, one of our fellow Spurs, Last Word on Spurs contributors. He'll be loving hearing that. Charlie, it's always a pleasure having you on Last Word on Spurs. You play a massive part in the Spurs community with the Athletic and what you do, and also your optimistic nature on View from the Lane. So where can people be checking out your content through the summer? I'm sure you'll be reporting a lot on what Spurs are doing and not doing potentially. And of course, keeping our heads above water on View from the Lane. Where can people check out all the great work you do?
Exactly. Yeah, View from the Lane is the Athletic Spurs pod, and it's twice weekly. Obviously not during the off season, but yeah, that's one place to go. And then the Athletic, there's so much stuff there that we do on Spurs. We're doing big pieces every week, and that's big features. Did one recently, big thing on Postecoglou. Speaking to various former players of his and coaches and colleagues and things like that. So that's the kind of stuff you can get. And I'm on Twitter at CD Eccleshare, and I link to all the podcasts, all my articles, everything there. That's the best place to go.
I suppose an ideal way, Charlie, to end this, I'm sure you would like Spurs to go after all their first choices, because we saw the amount of work you put into Arne's slot.
Yeah.
I won't even ask you the amount of hours you put in of research talking to Arne's friends in his contingent for that to go wrong. So I'm sure you're, as well as us, looking for hopefully Spurs to get their first choices, right?
Yeah, it's a really fine art, because you've got to have pieces ready to go in case, signing happens, but you don't want to go too early, because then, you get in an Arne slot situation where, I had like a 4,000 or 5,000 word piece ready, multiple interviews, etc. I might just put it online somewhere on like Medium or something, so people can read it. It'll be there with my piece on how Adama Traore was going to fit into Conte's wing. Those are my 2 big ones. But yeah, generally just about got the balance right. But yeah, you're going to lose some, unfortunately.
I sincerely hope, and I feel bad saying this, is Vicario the new David Raya already, where Charlie's already got to get another piece lined up where he's going tomorrow quickly on the phone frantically, got to find Vicario's teammates and what they make of it.
Yeah. Just tell me anything about this guy.
Man, okay. It is going to be a very long summer. It's been an absolute pleasure. Jamie, thank you so much, bud. You'll be joining us, still going on this transfer window hunt as to what Spurs do. Let's keep our fingers crossed, Jay, yeah?
Yeah, I hope so. And obviously, just come back on Charlie's point about what will constitute a successful season. I think 100% spot on. I remember in Mauricio Pochettino's first season, I think there were some very difficult times to start off with. I think even just before that Villa game where Harry Kane scored that free kick, I think probably the last time he scored a free kick. But before that, he was under big pressure. But I remember just seeing kind of a lot in that team that you could kind of see what they were looking to build. And I think Charlie's kind of spot on there. Just trying to get some identity back in this team and hopefully some sort of attacking philosophy. I know a lot of Spurs fans really keen for that. So, obviously a really good show. Some fantastic insight from Charlie. And, looking forward now, go and do some research on Vicario. And then I'm sure it will go to waste. The Spurs love to waste our time. But, really good show.
Yeah, I mean, I say fingers crossed we're going to end it on a high as Jamie tries to bring the Vicario line down on us. We shall see what the summer holds in store from the brilliant Jamie Brown at the Daily Hotspur and the superb Charlie Eccleshare from The Athletic. Make sure you go and check out View from the Lane. All of Charlie's articles, of course, on The Athletic. Guys, keep safe, keep well. We'll be back with you before you know it. And as always, come on, you